she said. "I'm blocking you for a week so you learn to appreciate me." I said, "Take a month." The words hung in the air for a moment, thick with a tension I was no longer willing to tolerate. I didn't feel anger, not exactly, but something inside me shifted, something final. Her expression, normally so confident in her manipulations, faltered just a little. She hadn't expected that. She was waiting for me to beg, to promise to do better, to apologize for whatever small mistake I'd made. But this time I wasn't going to play along. I stood there in the middle of our living room, the quiet hum of the city just beyond the windows, and watched her finger hover over the screen of her phone. I wasn't surprised when she blocked me without a word, but as I looked around at the apartment we'd shared, it all became so clear. I didn't want to be here anymore. Not with her, not with her games, and certainly not with the slow burn of resentment that had been building for months. She grabbed her purse, her face set in that all too familiar expression of superiority. "I'm staying with a friend for a few days," she said, but I knew it was a lie. She wasn't leaving to teach me a lesson, like she always claimed. No, she was leaving because the control she had over me was slipping. She wasn't used to not getting the reaction she wanted. "Fine," I said. "Take all the time you need." The door clicked shut behind her. I stood still for a moment, the emptiness of the room settling around me. I could feel the weight of everything that had led up to this. How many times had we fought over the smallest things? How many times had she manipulated me, used silence as a weapon, or made me feel like I wasn't enough? It had been a year and a half, and in all that time, I hadn't realized just how much of myself I'd given up. But standing there, alone for the first time in months, I felt something new, freedom. I didn't waste time. I picked up my phone and called the storage facility I'd seen advertised. A climate-controlled unit. 5 feet by 10 feet, it would do. A few minutes later, I was booking the unit, securing it for the next month. The first month was free with a promo code, and that was just perfect. I wasn't wasting a second. Her stuff was everywhere. The throw pillows on the couch, the trinkets she'd insisted on buying for the apartment, the clothes that had slowly overtaken half of my closet. Everything she'd brought with her. But now it was mine to deal with. I went to work. I packed her clothes first, moving them from the closet into boxes. I took my time, carefully folding each piece of clothing, knowing that when I was done, there would be nothing left of her in this place. I wasn't angry, not really. I was done. By 3 in the morning, everything was packed. I rented a U-Haul van, loaded it up, and made the drive to the storage unit. It felt almost therapeutic, the physical labor of moving her things, as if with each box, I was shedding some of the weight of our relationship. When I finished unloading everything into the unit, I organized it neatly, her things on one side, my mind clearer than it had been in months. I had control now. The next day, I changed the locks on the apartment. I called a locksmith. It cost me $120, but it was worth every penny. The apartment was mine again, my space, my rules. I thought about her. I thought about what she might say when she came back for her things. Maybe she would come around, beg me to take her back. She might even expect me to apologize for not fighting harder for her. But I wasn't going to apologize for setting a boundary. She had crossed it a long time ago. The weekend came and went in a blur of calm. The silence felt good. For the first time in a while, I could breathe without wondering when the next accusation would come, or when I'd have to placate her mood swings. The apartment was quiet, no manipulations, no games, just peace. I knew she would contact me eventually. She always did, but this time I wouldn't be the one to break. This time I was done. Total estimated words 600 to a target. 600. I knew she wasn't coming back, at least not anytime soon. And yet, I still felt this weight on my chest, a strange mix of relief and unease. I stared at the empty space around me, the silence pressing in from all sides. The apartment was so quiet without her. No accusations, no guilt trips, no passive-aggressive comments about my schedule, or how I never seemed to prioritize her. For the first time in months, it was just me. The sun had already dipped below the horizon by the time I finished cleaning up. The small apartment felt bigger now, the clutter of her things gone, the space open and clean. It smelled different, too, less like her perfumes and half-empty cups of coffee, more like fresh air, like a new beginning. I moved to the kitchen, my bare feet making soft echoes on the wooden floor. I turned on the faucet, watching the water swirl down the drain, as if I was washing away all the remnants of what had been. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had surrendered to the relationship until now, until I stood here in the midst of this newly reclaimed space. The silence felt foreign at first, unnerving even. I thought back to all the fights, the times she'd manipulated me into defending myself over the smallest things. Like the time I forgot to text her back during a work meeting, or the countless evenings I'd spent walking on eggshells, never quite knowing if I'd said the wrong thing or missed something important. I shook my head, pushing the thoughts away. I wasn't going to let this break me. By the time I finished organizing the few remaining items, I was feeling oddly calm. I sat down on the couch, the cushion still indented where she'd sat just days ago, and picked up my phone. I opened up a few work emails, mindlessly scrolling, but my mind kept drifting back to the moment she left. It was like something clicked inside me. I had let her dictate the terms of our relationship for too long. And now I was done. I pulled up the website for a nearby storage facility. I'd seen the ad earlier that week. Climate-controlled units, first month free. It was a sign, I told myself. A sign that it was time to take control back. I clicked through the pages, filling out the reservation form with a cold, calm precision. The confirmation popped up, 5 feet by 10 feet, just enough space for all her things. And it was cheap. $89 a month, the first month free with a promo code. Perfect. I needed to act fast. I had no idea when she would come back, but I wasn't going to take any chances. I had the place to myself, and for the first time in a long time, it felt good. I called a U-Haul, reserving a van for 4 hours, and started packing her things. I methodically moved through the apartment, sorting through her clothes, her books, her little knickknacks. The diffuser she loved, the throw pillows she insisted made the couch look more inviting. All of it went into boxes, neatly stacked in the living room. The process was almost therapeutic. With every item I packed, I could feel myself letting go of the relationship bit by bit. By 3 in the morning, the apartment was empty. The only things left were my things, the things that had always been mine. The TV, the furniture, my books. It felt like a victory, though I wasn't sure exactly what I was victorious over. It wasn't anger or resentment. It was something simpler, something deeper. I rented a van and drove to the storage facility. When I arrived, I unloaded everything into the unit, carefully arranging it all. Her clothes went on the left side, stacked neatly. The boxes of books and personal items went to the right, organized. I even left a path in the middle so she could access everything when she finally decided to pick it up. But I wasn't holding my breath. The quiet of the storage facility, the sterile air, felt like the final chapter in this little story. I wasn't angry anymore. Just resolved. I'd done what I needed to do. When I got back to the apartment, I called a locksmith. $120 for the peace of mind. I didn't want to worry about her coming back and finding a way to get in. I stood by the door as the locksmith worked, listening to the hum of the city outside. It was late, but I felt strangely awake. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the past few hours, maybe it was the excitement of finally having things back in my control. But I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared, I was calm. I thought about her. I thought about what she might do when she found out I had moved all her things. Would she be angry? Would she cry? Would she even care? I pushed the thoughts aside. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I'd spent so long trying to make her happy, trying to fix everything, that I forgot to take care of myself. But now, things were different. I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms of my life. Not anymore. As I stood in the doorway, listening to the locks click into place, I felt something new. Freedom. I spent the next few hours moving through the motions, but my mind was far from the tasks at hand. As I packed her things, each item felt like a reminder of the relationship I was leaving behind. The pink sweater she loved to wear, the books she'd insisted on stacking by the bed, each one was a piece of a life that had never quite fit. I wondered if she would ever see it as I did, as a pattern of manipulation disguised as love. But at that moment, I didn't care anymore. I wasn't looking for answers. I was done searching for something that had always been out of reach. The evening passed in a blur of packing tape and cardboard. The apartment felt both larger and emptier as I removed the last traces of her presence. The space was quieter now, almost unnervingly so. I couldn't help but feel this strange emptiness creeping in, like the calm before a storm. Would she fight back? Would she try to convince me it was a mistake? I had no idea. All I knew was that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living like I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion, the next emotional game. When the last box was packed and the last piece of furniture was shoved into the back of the van, I took a deep breath. I stood in the middle of the apartment, scanning the now empty space. It didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning. I had the room to breathe, the freedom I hadn't realized I'd lost. I locked the door behind me and made my way to the storage facility. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets almost deserted save for the occasional car passing by. The faint sound of a distant siren echoed off the buildings. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching my life unfold from the outside. I drove without thinking, my hands on the wheel, my thoughts scattered. I couldn't pinpoint where my mind was going, only that I was moving forward. There was no going back, no matter how much she might try to pull me in. When I arrived at the storage facility, I unloaded everything with precision, arranging her belongings neatly in the unit. I was oddly meticulous about it, placing her clothes in one section, her books in another. I even made a little aisle in the middle, as if to leave the door open for her, should she decide to come back for any of it. But I wasn't fooling myself. She wouldn't come back. Not for her things, and certainly not for me. The whole time I worked, there was a strange calm in me. It wasn't anger or relief, it was something deeper. I was simply done. No drama, no fighting, no begging. Just the quiet acceptance that it was over, and I was okay with it. More than okay, actually. By the time I finished, it was well past midnight. The storage unit was locked, and everything was neatly packed away. I didn't feel anything about it. No pride, no satisfaction, just peace. It was like I had finally cleared out all the emotional clutter I'd been holding on to for so long. I drove back to the apartment, feeling the quiet settling around me like a heavy blanket. The world outside seemed to fade as I walked through the door, back into the space that was mine again. The next morning, I called a locksmith. It was $120, but worth every penny. She still had a key to the apartment. I wasn't going to wait for her to show up and let herself in. I wasn't going to let her keep playing me. The locksmith arrived a few hours later, and I watched as he changed the locks. Each click of the bolt sliding into place felt like another piece of control sliding back into my hands. No more worrying about her coming in when I wasn't home. No more surprises. After he left, I stood by the door for a moment, my hand resting on the doorknob. I couldn't shake the thought that she would be back soon. Maybe tomorrow. But I was ready. I wasn't going to play her games anymore. That afternoon, I ran a few errands. The world felt strange quiet, but in a way that was almost comforting. It wasn't until I sat down in the coffee shop later that day, the warm aroma of espresso filling the air, that I let myself relax. I realized how much of my life had been spent trying to make her happy, trying to meet her needs while mine were slowly suffocated beneath the weight of her demands. I hadn't realized how drained I was until now. I didn't miss her, not in the way I thought I would. I didn't miss the fights, the manipulation, the constant emotional roller coaster. What I missed was the idea of her, the version of her that I had held on to, even when I knew I should let go. I had been afraid to admit it, but now I could see it clearly. It was never about love. It was about control, and I was done letting her have it. The next few days passed in a haze. The calm that followed her departure felt almost foreign, as though I was living in someone else's life. I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window instead of her complaining about how late I stayed at work. There were no arguments, no sudden outbursts. Just silence. I spent my time cleaning, reorganizing. It felt like I was shedding a skin I didn't even realize I was wearing. The apartment felt like mine again, the way it had been before she moved in. I rearranged the furniture, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. It wasn't a dramatic change. Just little shifts. A couch moved a few feet to the left, a new plant in the corner. It felt like reclaiming a small part of myself. The silence was almost too much at times, but it was also a relief. No more walking on eggshells, no more trying to decode her moods. I thought about all the times she'd picked fights over nothing. All the times I'd apologized just to keep the peace. I thought about how she always made it seem like I was the one who needed to change, like my every action was a slight against her. But the truth was, she never saw the way she used her silence as a weapon, how she'd manipulate me into believing I was the problem. I looked around the apartment, at all the changes I'd made, and I realized how much I had lost myself in that relationship. It wasn't just the emotional toll, it was the way she had slowly consumed all of my time, all of my attention, until I didn't even recognize myself anymore. It wasn't just her that I had to let go of, it was the version of me that existed only in the context of her demands and her games. By the time Friday rolled around, I had settled into a routine. I got up, made coffee, and spent the mornings working on the things that had been pushed to the back burner for far too long. I started paying attention to details I hadn't even noticed before. The way the sun streamed through the windows in the mornings. The sound of the coffee machine whistling to life. The way the quiet of the apartment was finally comfortable. It was like I had forgotten how peaceful it could be. And then, she texted me. It was early in the afternoon and I was sitting at my desk, reading through some emails when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, and my heart skipped a beat. "Do you miss me?" The message read. It took me a moment to even process the words. I hadn't heard from her since she left, not once. And now, here she was, reaching out as if nothing had happened, as if everything between us hadn't just come to a crashing halt. For a brief second, I felt that familiar wave of doubt creep in. Was this my chance to apologize? To make things right? But then I remembered the past year and a half. I remembered the emotional exhaustion, the constant need to prove myself, the manipulation that had become so routine I couldn't see it until it was too late. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't miss her. Not the way she wanted me to. I stared at the message for a moment longer, then tapped out my response. It wasn't much, just two things. First, the address of the storage unit. Second, the code to the unit, 4782. Your stuff is in Unit 37, paid through the end of next month. After that, it's your responsibility, we're done. I hit send and blocked her number. It was strange. There was no relief, no anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty. I was done. It felt like I had finally closed the door on something that had dragged on for far too long. I had honored my own boundaries. I had respected myself enough to stop playing her game. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. A new number. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I didn't respond. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of emails and thoughts about my next move. There was no more second guessing, no more wondering if I'd done the right thing. I had set a boundary and I was sticking to it. That evening, I took a walk around the block to clear my head. The air was cool, the streets quiet, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of her expectations on my shoulders. It felt good. I felt lighter. As I walked, I found myself thinking about all the little ways she had tried to control me, how she used silence as a weapon, how she made me feel like I had to prove my love over and over again, even when she never gave me the same in return. And I realized that, in a way, I had already won. I had let go of all of it. The next morning I woke up early, made coffee, and took a long, deep breath. I felt more at peace than I had in months. There was no looming sense of dread. There was no tightness in my chest. For the first time in a long time, it was just me, and I was okay with that. The text was a reminder of something I thought I had closed off. "Do you miss me?" Her words flashed on my screen, and for a brief moment I felt a wave of something, nostalgia, maybe. But then I remembered everything. The manipulation, the guilt, the way she would twist things so that I was the one apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I didn't miss her. I didn't miss the games. I didn't miss the chaos she brought into my life. But I felt this pressure, this nagging thought that maybe I should respond, maybe I should somehow offer some closure. I fought it. I didn't owe her anything. Instead of letting the temptation take hold, I opened my phone, quickly typing the message that would put an end to it. The words came easily, almost mechanically. I had thought about this moment for days, and now it was here. Your stuff is in Unit 37. Paid through the end of next month. After that, it's your responsibility. We're done. I could feel my heart racing for just a second, but then the calm returned. It was over. I had no desire to keep dragging this out. There was no drama, no long confrontation, No pleading. Just the simple truth of it all. I didn't look at my phone after that. I didn't need to see what she would say or how she'd react. She had been playing me for so long that any response from her was meaningless. I blocked her number without a second thought. It wasn't out of anger, it was just a matter of clarity. There was no room for her in my life anymore. The rest of the day was strangely quiet. I went about my usual routine, though it felt like something had shifted inside me. A weight had lifted. I realized how much emotional energy I had been spending, just trying to maintain the relationship. Even when it wasn't going well, I tried to fix things, tried to make her happy. But now, I was free. Free from the constant strain, free from her games. That evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood, letting the cool air wash over me. The sky was starting to darken, the city lights flickering on one by one. It was peaceful. The kind of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but in a way that felt right. I wasn't waiting for the next argument, the next manipulation. There was nothing left to fear. I spent the next few days focusing on myself. I rediscovered old hobbies, things I hadn't done in ages because I was always too busy trying to keep things together. I started cooking again, something I had always enjoyed, but had let slip. I even took up reading again, finishing a book that had been gathering dust for far too long. Her absence was starting to feel like a distant memory. At first, I had expected the emptiness to be overwhelming, but it wasn't. It was liberating. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I wasn't checking my phone constantly, wondering when the next fight would break out. I got a message from one of her friends a few days later. It was a simple text. "You're ignoring her. That's not cool." I didn't respond. I didn't owe an explanation to anyone, least of all her friends. They didn't know what I had been through, the way she manipulated me, how she used silence as a weapon. I didn't care if they thought I was the bad guy. Another message came, then a call. This time it was from her sister. "What did you do? She's heartbroken. You can't just throw her out like that." I didn't respond to that either. I wasn't going to get caught in their web. This was my life, my decision. The next week, I ran into one of her other friends at the grocery store. I hadn't seen her in months. She gave me a concerned look, like I had done something unforgivable. "You know she's devastated, right?" she asked, as if that was supposed to make me feel guilty. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't. It wasn't working. It was the right thing to do. She didn't say anything more. But the look she gave me said everything. She didn't understand, and honestly, I didn't care to explain. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The only person I needed to answer to was myself, and I knew I had made the right choice. The following weekend, I ran into another friend of hers. This one, a guy I had actually liked, someone who had always been kind to me. He asked if we could talk. We met up at a bar, and the conversation quickly turned to her. He said, "She's saying you blindsided her. That you kicked her out without warning." I let out a short laugh. "That's not what happened. She blocked me first. I just did what she asked. She said, 'Take a month.' I gave her one." He paused, taken aback, and then said, "Well, I guess you did what she asked for." I nodded. "I'm done with all the games, it's over." He tried to push it a little more, but I shut it down. I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I was done. It felt good. The whole conversation, the closure, it felt like the final step in truly letting go. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had set my boundaries, and I was sticking to them. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in ages. This was the beginning of something new. Something better. The past was behind me, and there was no looking back. The days after I blocked her felt strangely quiet. At first, I expected the anxiety to hit hard. The sense of loss or maybe even guilt. But neither came. The silence that stretched out felt different than it ever had before. It was peaceful. I found myself getting used to the calm, getting used to the absence of her voice, her presence, her constant need to stir up drama. The weekend passed without incident, and by Monday, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be on edge. I didn't hear from her, and I certainly didn't expect to. But of course, the moment I started to relax, the world around me shifted again. It came in the form of a text message. This time, it wasn't from her. It was from one of her friends. "Hey, you've been ignoring her texts, not cool." I stared at the screen for a moment, reading the words over and over. I hadn't blocked anyone else, But that message was a reminder of something I had hoped over: her influence on other people. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to justify myself to anyone, especially not to someone who only saw one side of the story. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what it was like to be with her, to constantly be made to feel like I wasn't enough, like I was always wrong. I let the message sit there, knowing it would probably be followed by more. Sure enough, by the end of the day, I had 2 more messages from different friends. Both were variations of the same thing. "You're being cruel. She's devastated." I blocked them, every single one. I didn't owe them anything, least of all an explanation. By the time Tuesday came around, I thought things might finally settle down. I was wrong. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment. When I opened the door, I found her sister standing there, arms crossed, a scowl on her face. "You need to fix this," she said, her voice sharp. "What you did to her wasn't right." I felt my pulse quicken for a moment, the tension rising, but I kept my calm. What I did to her. She blocked me first. She left. I didn't kick her out. Her sister stepped forward, ignoring the boundary I'd set. "She was trying to get your attention, trying to make you realize what you were doing. And you just let her go like she was nothing." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I wasn't going to let her push me back into the corner I'd spent too long in. She wasn't trying to get my attention. She was trying to control me. You didn't see what was happening. You didn't live it. So I'm not going to explain myself to you. Her sister's face reddened and she stepped back. "You're heartless," she muttered. "She loved you. You don't get it." I shook my head. No, she didn't love me. She loved controlling me. There's a difference. I'm done. I closed the door, cutting off her protest before it could go any further. I stood there, my hand resting on the knob, as her angry knocks echoed through the door. For a moment I almost opened it, but I knew what would happen. She'd try to guilt me into reopening the door I'd just closed. I wasn't going to let her in. Not again. Minutes later, I heard security from the building knock on the door. I didn't answer. They didn't have to be involved. But I knew they were there to make sure things didn't escalate. I didn't care. I had nothing to hide. The next morning, I got a message from one of her other friends. A guy had gotten along with fairly well before everything started to fall apart. I had always respected him, thought of him as a decent guy. He asked if we could grab a beer, that he wanted to talk. I agreed. Maybe it was time to face the fallout. Maybe it was time to hear what she had told people about me. I met him at the bar, sitting down at a quiet table in the back, the noise of the crowd muffled by the low hum of the conversation around us. He didn't waste time getting to the point. "She's saying you blindsided her, that you just kicked her out with no warning, that she never saw it coming." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my cool. "That's not how it happened. She blocked me first. She said she needed space. I gave it to her. I wasn't going to beg her to stay when she clearly didn't want to. I just respected her request." He was quiet for a moment, processing it. "She blocked you first." "Huh." He took a sip of his beer. "She's not telling people that part." I smiled bitterly. "Of course not. She's playing the victim. She always does." He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Look, I get it. But man, putting all her stuff in storage, that's pretty cold." I shrugged, leaning forward. What was I supposed to do? Leave it in my apartment for a month while she figured out what she wanted? I made it clear she could take her time. But that's on her if she didn't want to pick it up. He was quiet again, clearly thinking it over. "I guess you did what you had to do." I nodded. "Exactly. I did what I had to do. I'm not playing her game anymore." The conversation shifted after that. He didn't argue anymore. We talked about other things: work, life, the general small talk that made the conversation feel like it used to. But the weight of the situation had shifted. I had said what needed to be said. The door was closed. There was no going back. That night, I went to bed without feeling any of the old anxiety. No wondering what she was doing, no worrying about what story she was spinning. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was moving on, and no one could change that. The next day I didn't hear from her, or her friends, or anyone. It felt like they were starting to realize there was no more story to tell. And as the silence stretched on, I realized just how much peace I had found. It had been 2 weeks since the last interaction with her, and the silence was starting to feel permanent. I hadn't heard from her or any of her friends for days now. I'd expected the pressure to build, for her to find some way to try and force a conversation, to guilt me into talking, but nothing came. It was almost unnerving how quiet it had gotten. I tried to push it out of my mind. I kept myself busy with work, rearranged my apartment some more, and started catching up on things I'd ignored during the chaos of our relationship. It felt good. It felt like I was finally breathing again. Then, on the 15th day of this unexpected peace, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. At first, I didn't answer. I had been so used to blocking every call, every number connected to her that the thought of answering was foreign. But then, it buzzed again. I sighed, pulled the phone out of my pocket, and looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me this wasn't just another call from one of her friends. I answered it. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Hey, man," came the voice on the other end. It was a familiar one I hadn't heard in months. "It's Ethan. We need to talk." Ethan was a guy I used to get along with during the early part of my relationship with her. He was her friend, not mine. Still, we'd hung out a few times. A decent guy, or so I thought, until I realized how many things I had overlooked. I had no idea what he wanted now, but I was certain wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I just want to clear some things up," Ethan said. "She's upset. And I know you've been ignoring her, but you can't just leave her hanging like that." I let out a small laugh. I didn't leave her hanging. She blocked me first. I just did what she asked for. There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "Look, I get it," Ethan said. "But she's in pieces right now. You know how she is. She's not handling this well." "I'm sorry she's upset," I replied, not feeling sorry at all. "But this isn't about me. She made her decision, I made mine. I'm done." Ethan paused. "You really don't feel anything, do you? After everything, you just walk away like it was nothing." I could hear the judgment in his voice, but I stood firm. "It wasn't nothing. But I'm done. It's been like this for too long. I had to let go." He didn't respond right away. Instead, there was the sound of him shifting on the other end, like he was trying to find the right words. "You know," he finally said, "she was trying to get you to notice her. You know how she gets. She thought if she blocked you, you'd come running back." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, well, it didn't work. I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not going to beg her to treat me like I matter." There was a pause, and then I heard a soft chuckle. Ethan seemed to shift gears, maybe realizing this wasn't going to be the conversation he expected. "I get it, man," he said. "But look, I just think you should hear her out. Maybe you guys can work this out." "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "There's nothing to work out. I've heard everything she's got to say and I'm done." There was a silence on the other end again, longer this time. I could almost hear him thinking, probably trying to figure out how to keep me engaged, to get me to feel guilty for sticking to my decision. But I wasn't going to give in. "Not this time. You know," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I've been thinking about this a lot. About how I let her manipulate me, how I kept making excuses for her behavior. I'm done with that. I'm not going to let anyone control me like that again. Not her, not anyone." Ethan sighed. "Yeah, I hear you. Just be careful, okay? She's not taking this well." I sat up straight, my back against the chair. "I'm not worried about her anymore," I said, my voice stronger now. "I'm worried about me. About moving on. That's all I care about now." There was another long pause, this time filled with a quiet sort of resignation. "All right, man. If that's what you need to do, then I guess I can't stop you." "Thanks for understanding," I said, though I wasn't sure if he really did. We ended the conversation shortly after, and I hung up, feeling a bit lighter. There was no guilt, no second guessing, just clarity. Ethan's words didn't faze me, and for once, I felt sure of my decision. That night, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. The weight of the past few weeks of the breakup, the silence, the manipulations, finally began to lift. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, wondering when the next call would come, or the next confrontation would happen. I was free. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without wondering what would happen next. The weight of her expectations was gone, and I realized just how much of myself I had lost trying to keep the peace with someone who would never meet me halfway. I was ready to move forward. The past was behind me. It had been 2 months since I packed up her things, since I finally took control of my life and stopped allowing her to manipulate me. The weight that had once pressed down on my chest, her demands, her games, her ever-present influence, had lifted, and in its place was an undeniable sense of freedom. But it hadn't come easily. I had fought for it not with her, but with myself. Her silence in those 2 months had been a blessing, but it had also given me time to think. It gave me time to realize just how much I had been tolerating, just how much I had been willing to ignore, because I thought I could fix it, because I thought I could make her see me as someone worth loving. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that I had let go. What mattered was that I had reclaimed myself. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, wondering when the next game would start. I wasn't bracing myself for the inevitable emotional storm. Instead, I felt lighter. I felt like I had taken back something I didn't even realize I had lost. It was then that I heard from her again. It wasn't a text, it wasn't a call, it was something more direct. Something that made my stomach drop when I saw the familiar face in the lobby of my apartment building. Her father. I had no idea what he was doing there, but I didn't need to guess. I had been expecting this for a while, even if I didn't want to admit it. It had always been part of the plan. Part of the script that I knew she would write when things didn't go her way. She would play the victim, and her family would come to her rescue. The doorbell rang that evening. I was at home, just finishing up some work, when I heard the sharp chime from the hallway. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there he was. Her father, standing in the hallway, his expression stern, his posture rigid. "You the one dating my daughter?" he asked, his voice deep with accusation. I corrected him, "We're done." His face reddened, but he didn't flinch. "I think we need to talk about how you treated her." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. The tension in my chest was heavy, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. "Come in," I said, not bothering with pleasantries and fighting. I had nothing to explain. He walked in and looked around the apartment, taking in the neatness, the space that was now mine again. I watched him closely, my arms crossed. I wasn't going to let him tell me I was in the wrong. "She loved you," he said, as if that somehow justified everything. "You know that, right?" "I know," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but love isn't supposed to be about control. She tried to control me for far too long, and I couldn't keep playing along." He was quiet for a moment, clearly processing what I had said. He glanced around again, and I could see the discomfort in his eyes. He wasn't happy to be here, but I also knew he wasn't happy with what had happened. The idea that his daughter could be left behind, even if she was the one who had done the hurting, wasn't sitting well with him. "She said you blindsided her," he muttered, almost as if he were trying to convince himself. "That you just kicked her out without a word. That you didn't even care." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, the weight of everything I'd endured sitting heavy on my shoulders. "She blocked me first. She asked for space. I gave it to her. She chose this. I just honored her decision." The words hung between us for a moment. He looked at me, his face softer now, but still conflicted. "She needs to learn that actions have consequences," I added, my voice firm. "I did what I had to do." He rubbed his face, sighing. "I know," he said, his tone resigned. "I've tried talking to her. She's not listening. She thinks everyone else is the problem." "She's the problem," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "She has been for a long time." He stood there for a moment, silent, before nodding slowly. "I'm sorry for what she put you through, for what she's put us all through." I nodded back, but I didn't feel a sense of closure. I didn't feel relief, I just felt tired. Tired of the manipulation, tired of the fighting. "Thanks," I said quietly, "but it's done now. I'm done." He stood up, still clearly trying to process everything, before shaking his head. "I know. I didn't want you to think we were all against you." I appreciated the sentiment, but I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. His daughter had made her choices, and I had made mine. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. He left without another word, and as the door clicked shut behind him, I realized something. I didn't feel the need to defend myself anymore. I didn't need anyone to understand. I had done what was best for me, and that was enough. I leaned against the door for a moment, taking in the stillness that had settled back into the apartment. The weight of the past was gone. There was nothing left but the future. A future where I didn't have to wonder if I was enough. Where I didn't have to question if I was being manipulated. I was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace,